I'm Aaron Sagers, and this is Talking Strange.
Aloha, spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange Live, a paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek Network. I am your ringleader for the next 40 or so minutes, journalist, author, researcher of all things weird, Aaron Sagers. You can also catch me on 28 Days Haunted on Netflix and Paranormal Caught on Camera on Travel Channel, the Max streaming service, and Discovery Plus. And we are coming at you from the Ethereal Horror Fest in Austin, Texas. Yes, make some noise. Super excited to be back here at Ethereal and to be joined by some fellow spooky nerds and friends, people that I'm honored to call colleagues and fellow mischief makers of the unexplained. Now, we're going to be talking today about paranormal and the horror genre and how one influences the other and vice versa. But before I get into it, and we will open things up for questions, so please get some questions ready towards the end, or just throw those hands up whenever a question pops into your brain. But let me go ahead and go down the line and introduce my friends and guests for today. First off, at the far end, he is an Austin-based filmmaker, storyteller, and podcaster. He received his bachelor's in film and media studies from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi in 2005. He has taught filmmaking and storytelling in Austin through organizations such as Totally Cool, Totally Art, Austin School of Film, and the Austin Film Society. And his debut feature film, all of you film nerds should know this one, Dig, won the Narrative Feature Audience Award at the 2010 Austin Film Festival. And he has served on the Film Commission Programmer and Young Filmmakers Program Director for the Austin Film Festival in 2017. He also launched his independently produced series, The Night Owl Podcast, which has won Best Podcast in the Austin Chronicles Reader Poll in 2019, 2021, and 2023. His name is Stephen Belyeu. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. Right next to Stephen, we have a makeup artist and FX makeup artist based in Austin, Texas. She is a co-owner of Hawgfly Productions, Inc., and has been a professional makeup artist for more than 20 years. And some of her many accomplishments include second in World Body Painting Festival for FX Makeup, fourth in the World Body Painting Festival for SFX Body Painting, and an Emmy nomination for key makeup for the movie Temple Grandin, and she has worked on many films, including Machete, Machete Kills, Friday the 13th, Bloodfest, Teeth, Stoker, and in addition, you could see her work on several TV series, including Mr. Mercedes, The Sun, Walker, Texas Ranger, The Leftovers, and The Long Road Home. Make some noise for Meredith Johns. Next to Meredith is an old friend of mine. That was not an age crack. That time was not an age joke. There will be age jokes later. He has spent much of his adult life exploring strange places, exploding strange places, from the first Russian colony in Three Saints Bay, Alaska, to the pyramids of Egypt. He's explored paranormal hotspots in more than 40 countries. He has a career in law enforcement as a law enforcement officer with more than 31 years of experience. He's worked as a hostage negotiator, a SWAT officer, a mental health investigator, as a sex crime and homicide detective. He's also an international lecturer and author of 5 books on the paranormal, including Detecting Paranormal, Diaries of a Paranormalist, How to Be a Paranormal Detective, and Roswell, the After Action Report. And his latest work, Messages from Mothman, opens new avenues of interpreting premonitions and paranormal experiences. And he does have some copies of books, which he will be giving away for the person that asks good questions during this panel. His name is Greg Lawson. Yeah. There will be stupid human tricks to get the free books, yes. Brandon Hodge is an author, collector, historian specializing in the history of writing planchettes, talking boards, and other spirit communication devices. He's long fascinated by the world of tipping tables, seances, spiritualism, and ghostly encounters. Brandon is a leading scholar in the occult field whose expertise is consulted by museums and institutions worldwide. He has served as on-air talent for dozens of popular radio and television programs, and his research and his seance artifact collection were featured on both Science Channel's hit show Oddities, the Travel Channel's Ouija-related Patience Worth episode of Mysteries of the Museum, and Brandon's research on spiritualism history has appeared in the pages of the Smithsonian Magazine, and his popular Ghost in the Machines column appears every quarter in the pages of the magazine of the Society for Psychical Research. Brandon owns the world's finest collection of writing planchettes and other seance-related devices. All of those are featured on his popular website, planchette.com, and he's an Austin boy.
Yep.
Make some noise for Brandon Hodge.
Local.
Thank you again, folks, for joining me. My first question, and we can kind of go down the line, and if you don't have a response, that's okay, but I'm curious about sort of the origins, your horror DNA, your horror origin story. What was that movie? And actually, I'm going to call out Len Lawson for phrasing it so perfectly outside. She was saying that it seemed like every horror nerd, every spooky kid has that movie that they saw when they were perhaps too young, and typically the channel or the VHS tape was popped in by some adult or older person that was, should not have been showing it to our impressionable minds. What is your horror origin story? Brandon, why don't you start with that?
Okay, yeah. So for me, it was renting movies in Mauriceville, Texas, little small town. We'd go rent VHS tapes, and for whatever reason, they allowed the Faces of Death series.
Oh, yeah.
On just the general, not in the naughty room in the back, but just for general, and so at the, ripe age of 11, 12 years old, that media was being consumed. And I'm almost embarrassed to say, but, we're here local, we're all friends, right? The one that got me, and this is funny because I'd seen a ton of horror movies up to this point, including Faces of Death and real things. Well, a whole other discussion there. But the one that got me and made me shiver myself to sleep was Return of the Living Dead Part 2. The punk one, like the weird, I don't know why, y'all, but that one just, my friend Rodney was a few years older than me. It was a sleepover, got popped in the VHS, into the VHR, and man, that one got me. It was probably because we were near a cemetery where his mother's trailer was, kind of out in the dark woods, and so when the toxic waste dumps off the back of the truck, it seeps into the cemetery. I thought that's happening tonight, like a half mile up the road. That's it for me. I'm down. So yeah, that's my horror origin story. There.
Any quote from that movie that sticks with you that sends shivers down your spine?
No.
It's all right, great one. Okay, I appreciate that, Greg Lawson.
I'm going to have to date myself a little bit. We didn't have VHS. We had 3 channels. 3 channels, people. That was it. And I remember I was 5 years old. I was living on Perry Lane right here in Austin, and they kept advertising Frankenstein was going to be on Saturday night. Frankenstein. Yeah, y'all, the original Frankenstein. But I'm 5, right? And I stayed up. And I wanted to watch it, and my mother was like, "Oh, you're not watching this, no." And of course, I threw a fit because I'm good at that. And she goes, "Oh, you want to watch it? Okay." So she made the Jiffy Pop popcorn, the stuff that you do on the stove, and some orange soda. And I sat and I watched Frankenstein. And that night, the blonde lady come to get me. I had a nightmare, and I woke up and I look, and being a recovering Catholic. I looked up at the Sacred Heart picture of Jesus with his heart sticking out. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely, it was a bad night. I ran out screaming and everything. And and from that point on, that was my fascination with horror.
You're hooked.
What happened there? Yeah.
And
Jiffy
Meredith,
Pop.
I love that you're on this panel because you also make monsters. You make the nightmares. So for you, as a little baby Meredith, what was the intro, the horror origin story?
So there's actually a 3-parter probably. We'll go quick, but my parents tried to protect me from horror movies because they thought I was an innocent, sweet little kid. But I snuck in and watched them watching Poltergeist, and I loved it. And I was like, this is amazing. And then my parents let me watch E.T., which scared the crap out of me.
Same.
Like, there was the glowing little finger next to my window because it was right next to my bed, and I still have problems with ET. Like, my assistants tease me about it. It's a problem. Other aliens, Predator, xenomorphs, no problem. ET, ooh. It's still a bit of a problem.
Waterlogged ET.
Oh God, when he turned white.
Oh God.
Oh. Ugh, stuck with me. Poltergeist, no problem. Friday the 13th, no problem. They wouldn't let me watch any of those. They made me watch E.T. Not cool. So the one that made me want to be an effects artist was The Thing. So that made me want to do effects. So that's my origin story.
Yeah. Shameless plug. We did just have John Carpenter on an episode of Talking Strange. Yeah.
Jealous.
The E.T. It's funny because E.T. taught me to mistrust like government agents.
Exactly.
And authority figures.
This is how I am who I am.
So there you go.
Which now only carry flashlights.
Yes, yeah. They put the guns back. But Steven, how about you?
Well, first off, The Thing is my favorite horror film, so yes, I agree. That I discovered later, though. So I was, it's hard to remember how young I was, but I grew up in a small town that had nothing in it, absolutely nothing in it. You had to drive 30 miles to the closest gas station. But we got a little cafe diner that opened up, and for some reason, this old guy decided to open up a small video store inside it, VHS. That's the time period I grew up in. And I would just walk to the store and get stuff, and they wouldn't check. They didn't care how old you were. So that's where I was just like, finally, I can discover horror. And I found a few things, but I think the thing that really shook me, that really kind of put me on a path to like really trying to examine horror and not be afraid of it, I rented The Exorcist at like a very young age. I have to give you a little backstory, though. I was an altar boy at a Catholic church.
Same.
Recovering Catholic.
4 altar boys up here?
4. Whoa, really?
That's how it happens.
So I was not touched every 11 years. I don't know how I did it.
I'm an intact male.
Yeah. And
I just talk too much.
But seeing that, like my grandma's house, she's Hispanic. It was covered with the heart, Jesus with the heart hanging out. So the imagery was really there. And then also just I worked with a priest every Sunday, and even during the weekday I would have to go help clean the sacristy and everything. It messed with me big time. Just thinking about how something can happen like that out of the blue. And the way The Exorcist was done was so, it was done a little bit more atmospheric and taking the pace really slow, where it wasn't like right away horror. So I believed the story that I saw at that young age, and I was like, this is terrifying.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think we should most definitely circle back to Exorcist momentarily. I'll say for me, I was weirdly a monster kid before I started seeing some of the monster movies. There was kind of those moments where I'm the youngest of 5 kids, again, Catholic family, and so there were some movies that I think I was absorbing through osmosis as my siblings were just talking about it. But I would I read this book about Universal Monsters and how all the effects were made, which then I started watching the Universal Monster movies, and it wasn't scary. It was more like it was just my jam. It was kind of comforting in a way. But my mom, and she denies this to this day, would watch the Hammer horror movies, which were far bloodier and gorier, and those shook me a bit. But I think it took a while. I don't remember specifically when I first saw Poltergeist, and Exorcist was sort of the boogeyman movie that in a Catholic family is just verboten. You don't see it. But I think the movie that I first remember seeing that connected me to the paranormal was probably Ghostbusters. And Ghostbusters, of course, written by Dan Aykroyd and Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis, and it introduced this notion of paranormal investigators. And they treated the ghosts seriously, the phenomena seriously, even though they would kind of goof on one another. And they had gadgets, and they had this kind of methodology. So I was like, oh, these paranormal investigators are out there. And Dan Aykroyd, being from a family of spiritualists, just adds so much more credence to it. So what was kind of the moment within pop culture that you connected to sort of the paranormal side of things, and you started thinking like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe that's out there. Maybe that's something that I want to explore further. Stephen, for you, it was The Exorcist?
It was an incident that happened to me in real life, so it's a little different on my side. But The Exorcist really got me to start like turning my attention toward, well, what did I experience? Because I had a very scary experience that I talk about on the show, my podcast, and it's why I started the podcast when I was around 10. I saw The Exorcist shortly after that, and it kind of allowed me to be like, okay, what I saw and what I experienced that was really like terrifying to me as a kid, there could be something out there. And then I started to realize there's the whole world of the paranormal, the unexplained ghost stories that I was fascinated in. So what I think when I discovered Ghostbusters around the same time, it made it really interesting because I was like, well, this is like more comforting to like know that like people can go out there and try to seek answers as opposed to just take on what happens to them and just not know what to do. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot like that, just kind of discovering my own personal experience with what I call the girl in my room who haunted me when I was a kid, to seeing The Exorcist and then seeing other types of versions of paranormal films where it was exploring the paranormal in different ways, seriously, with comedic relief, things like that.
Yeah. And certainly, like, the fascination with the paranormal for me didn't start with Ghostbusters, but it was when I saw, like, the investigators on a big screen. There was something about that connected with me. Meredith, how about you?
So I think, ironically, the reason that Poltergeist wasn't scary to me is that I had a friend in my room when I was a kid that would move. I had army men because I was a creative child, and I stuck them on the ceiling, and they would move around at night and make different patterns and things. And I was like, oh, I don't know why this person's scared of this. This is totally normal. So I feel like watching it in the movie, I was like, is this supposed to be scary? Kind of was my like correlation. Ghostbusters definitely made me think, oh, maybe they actually are scary, but my ghost is friendly. I had invisible friends as a kid, everything like that. So I think it was just surrounded by it, and I thought it was normal. Now, Exorcist was another movie that made me want to be an effects artist, though, because Dick Smith is the guy I studied with. So that also, I think, because I had started to follow his stuff and break down how he did all the effects, again, not scary to me because it's fake. It's made up and everything like that. So I think, I don't know why E.T. still scares me, but everything else just gets dumbed down because I'm like, oh, well, this makes sense because these are friendly, or this is like, that's where my world went.
And certainly peeking behind the curtain of the movie magic somewhat demystifies it somewhat. But yeah, Poltergeist is also notable because we did have, in the early 80s, these paranormal investigators in the film trying to apply some sort of science or pseudoscience to the phenomena.
Sure, and everything that happened to the cast after that movie too. There's that whole folklore that all the things that happened afterwards. You got to wonder, okay,
that
was real.
We
could talk about that forever. Oh yeah, exactly.
By the way,
that could be a whole podcast, but yeah.
So, Greg, how about you?
Yeah, I hate to beat a dead horse, but yeah, it was Exorcist. It was when I was a kid. My brother would take me to graveyards and to abandoned buildings and stuff like that. We were doing urban exploration when I was 5 and 6 years old. He was 17 at the time, and he would take me out and do this stuff. So I did that with my friends. Well, by the time I'm 11, is when Exorcist came out, right around then. And I remember what that was like and what was going on. That was one of the first newspaper articles I ever read, and I probably didn't read another one until I was in my 20s. But I remember reading that one because it was so shocking. My brothers went to the Exorcist, and they were so shocked. And we did the ghost hunting and did I was the kid in the cemetery and doing the weird stuff. And then along came Ghost Story with Fred Astaire. If you haven't seen that, it is a fantastic, very well done, old creepy movie. It's not an old creepy movie. It's 1978, I think. But that one is where I realized there was something else. There's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of other stuff behind the curtain that I find very interesting to reveal. So, yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Brandon?
I mean, carrying that thread from, that early exposure to, what brings us here, for me, it's a slightly different media. I mean, it's written books, but it does go into the televised media, and in that, for those of you who remember the Time Life psychic commercials,
Yep.
right? That is what got me. There were 2 book lines. There were the multi-volume Psychic Phenomenon or
Mysteries of the Unknown.
Mysteries of the Unknown was a standalone volume that was the one I actually got. I always wanted the multi-part, but there was the Mysteries of the Unknown book. And I recently gifted my now 10-year-old daughter a copy of that in hopes of similarly warping her, because I finally wound up with a copy of that, a used copy from wherever. And I still have it. I still read it. And I remember this, at a young age, probably, young teenager, realizing that someone had written that. It didn't just magically appear. There had to be someone that was paid professionally to produce to assemble this research and to put that on paper. And that draws a direct thread from that teenage realization that somebody can do this to the work I do now.
Yeah. My chosen profession started as a journalist, so I was picking up reruns of Kolchak the Night Stalker, which I loved, still love, and then there was In Search Of, reruns of that, hosted by Leonard Nimoy. But those commercials that you're mentioning, the Time Life ones, are burned in my brain, and it was always very, very serious, like male voiceover of like, a man goes for a walk and finds himself in 1875 in Ireland. And then like flashes to like, a woman experiences psychic phenomena in her twin across the world, feels the burning pain of her touching the hot stove. And I'm like, I am both terrified to order these, but I need to have these books in my life.
Yes.
Yeah. So I totally relate to you on that one. I think with Exorcists, let's kind of stick with that for a moment, because first off, it premiered 1973, December 24th, I believe, right? So it is a Christmas movie.
Yep. Technically.
Yeah. But 73. 73. We're just a month away from the 50th anniversary. And I also have to, he was not able to join us, but Joseph Laycock, who is a religious studies professor in Austin, he has a new book out called The Exorcist Effect. It's a great book. Please pick it up, check it out. A big plug for that. But The Exorcist, a movie that was a blockbuster, had people lining around the blocks, lining up for hours to see it. It was such a buzz at the time. It was viral before viral was a thing. And then there was the news reports of people fainting and vomiting, and cinema owners saying, I'm cleaning up vomit at least once per showing. And it just became a thing that people were terrified to see it, but had to see it, and then led to sort of this religious fervor as a result. So, yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that down the line. And Brandon, I think you're a perfect person to start with, because one of the things that came out of that was, along with Rosemary's Baby and then The Omen, we kind of had this revamped satanic panic, moral panic that emerged, but also the demonization of Ouija boards.
Right. Yes.
So speak a little bit to that and the Exorcist Effect as you view it from your professional standpoint.
I mean, it was a very powerful and culturally impactful moment. And it's one thing, though, that for me, I have trouble sort of reconciling modern talking points about The Exorcist and what they attribute to it, as far as my discipline is concerned, and how it adds up with the historical record. I actually just submitted a chapter to an academic anthology on the cultural impact of Ouija. And it has an immense effect. It largely, that and the other movies you mentioned, help spark the satanic panic where we're going to go after everything. We're going to go after Ouija boards and Dungeons and Dragons and witchcraft and everything else. But also, what I am very careful to point out is that everything old is new again.
Cyclical,
with The
yeah.
Exorcist. And because there is kind of this modern talking point that what we see in a lot of modern paranormal shows that Aaron can certainly attest to here is that we see this vilification of the talking board by, many are very, very squeamish about Ouija boards and other spirit communication apparatus as if they themselves are responsible for this possession. And it comes out of this moment in The Exorcist where Linda Blair's character pulls the Ouija board out from behind the mother pulls the Ouija board behind the dryer. What's this? Oh, this is Captain Howdy. There's a brief moment. It takes up less than 2 minutes. And then the planchette moves, and then it's just left to hang there, this moment. And I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later in the film, we have Blair spitting up split pea soup, and so the correlation is drawn that, Captain Howdy did it, and which is, I believe, the filmmaker's intent. But as a historian, we look back, so we have this modern talking point of The Exorcist is responsible for this demonization of the Ouija board and all these modern talking points that it's this gateway to demonic possession. And the fact is, it wouldn't take long for me with any of you now, you pull out a tablet, do a quick newspaper research for any newspapers predating the talking board, going back decade by decade, to the Ouija's creation in the 1890s and beyond to the automatic writing planchette before that, even to table tipping and spirit rapping seances in the 1840s and 1850s, to find that same demonization is so incredibly common and certainly nothing new on the historical record, and specifically targeted toward these spirit communication apparatus that predate Ouija. But what is important to note is that it's now amplified through the lens of modern media and modern mass consumption. And so there is certainly an aspect of that where, we see this ripple effect as we are influenced as in our younger days by this stuff, how that influences not only us as individuals, but as sort of this collective unconsciousness to accept these things as truth.
Yeah, and most certainly agree that there were crimes blamed on the Ouija board. The Ouija told me to do it kind of crimes that were in it. Yes, it's a good thing to blame. But yet suddenly when it's part of a mass media moment that millions of people are taking part in, it kind of shifts the narrative a little bit or a lot of bit. And to this day, I mean, look, 15 years prior, maybe not even, maybe 10 years prior, it was used harmlessly in episodes of Dennis the Menace as just like a nothing, not anything bad, just like, a little game. I Love Lucy. So, and it continues to this day. Yeah, it is now Paranormal Activity. They use a Ouija board, and it's the gateway, the portal to hell. It's many TV shows kind of point to it. I also want a shameless plug. I do sell a tiki Ouija board. So I personally do not think that it is a gateway to any dimension. But the tiki dimension, yeah, you will summon spirits, but probably of the rum kind. Greg, I want to get your perspective because again, like your brothers having seen this thing, the Exorcist effect, being a Catholic kid. Did it loom large, on your childhood, and do you continue to see sort of the impact of The Exorcist in your paranormal research and investigations?
I do see a lot of impact of The Exorcist just all around. I mean, it's kind of on the surface. It's bizarre. After recovering from being a altar boy, I thought I would want to be a psychologist, and I made it all the way to statistical analysis for behavioral sciences and realized I don't want to hear your freaking problems. So I switched, but I do want to know why you do what you do. And it's really interesting because if you were talking about 1973 and then the early 2000s, I don't remember when they remastered and re-released in theaters The Exorcist. I don't know if any of y'all attended any of that, but my wife, Lynn, and I, we attended it over in Pflugerville. It was the new backing downstairs, and it was a comedy. That's how much our culture and our society has changed since 1973. There was catcalling, there was laughing, there was just jokes being made during the thing, and it just kind of me as for what I do and what my background is, I kind of sat back and went, wow, that's how far we've come. So that's a little outside of the paranormal realm, but still that's in a cultural aspect of how we view this very iconic and influential film. So I found that really interesting.
But has that pendulum swung back? I mean, because that was late 90s, early 2000s, and then since then, we have had movies like, Paranormal Activity, that was 2007, 2008, I believe. Then there was The Conjuring in 2013, which very much brought back this heavy Judeo-Christian approach to paranormal, and it starts with a ghost and ends with a demon, and that continues to be in a format with a lot of paranormal pop culture now. So I kind of wonder if The Exorcist released now, if it would still be a comedy or if it would be back to horror.
Well, you and I are friends with Andrea Perrin.
Yep.
And
the daughter of the family from the Conjuring film.
And the Conjuring film is nothing like what they experienced at all. Yet it has become true. We have enacted this thing. We've created this thing that we've brought forward. In the 1980s, I was part of a mental health unit here in Austin, and we would do all of our interactions with people that were having crisis. And in that, part of that was a satanic panic. I ended up having to go around to a bunch of different organizations and do presentations on what was going on, what we were seeing at the time as far as the trend of people going into cemeteries and defacing things and leaving dead animals and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very cyclical, and I think that generations kind of we learn something, and then we have another generation, and we kind of forget to teach them that, and then that brings them back around to where it's time for them to learn again.
Yeah, I mean, I would predict that if The Exorcist were released now, it would be back to a horror film, and everything old is new again. We now are getting, by Chuck Russell, who directed Nightmare on Elm Street 3, we have a reboot of the Witchboard franchise coming out, which actually looks pretty good, in my opinion. But sort of tapping back into the bit of that boogeyman superstition.
Well, I mean, as a historian, the Witchboard films themselves added
much lore.
So much lore that did not exist. I mean, it's
Pythagoras,
so,
right? Came from that?
Well, no, that was an old one, right. But so much, lore that didn't exist before it. You make it up for a movie, and suddenly it becomes truth. Suddenly, salt circles are the answer to everything. And
it's good protection.
It's just the effect of media.
I really have to watch my sodium, so it's really not the answer.
High blood pressure medication, and I am safe.
Yeah, I want to come back to that thread in a minute about the movies contributing to belief even further. But Meredith, did you have a thought about The Exorcist, or?
Well, I feel like the interesting thing is if they were to remake The Exorcist now, we have, and I deal with this with filmmakers a lot, where we the sensationalism of the effects and things like that would have to be like Dick Smith's makeup, and that was amazing, right? Like off the charts, like mind blowing and everything like that. Now they would have to almost take it a step further and almost get, and this is, I do love gore, but they would have to almost take it a step further and make it even more intense, I think, to get the eyes that the people, because when I watched The Exorcist with the remake, again, I had people laughing too, and I was like, dude, this movie scared the crap out of me. How is this person walking backwards down the stairs not creepy to you? But it's because you've you've seen like Paranormal Activity. You've seen all these things where things are just so much more intense that now people are needing that intensity to get the butts in the seats.
I wonder how much of that just extends to movies that we love from our past overall. That if you sit a 10, 11-year-old kid down now and say, I'm going to show you Star Wars, the movie that rocked my world.
I just had that with Goonies.
This is
We showed the teenagers Goonies, and
Goonies holds up though.
they didn't think so.
Well,
I can vouch for
like,
Ghostbusters.
Kids these
Ghostbusters held up.
Yeah.
With my 7 and 10-year-old.
and there's some super rushed effects on Ghostbusters.
Oh, there's
That
some
final
sloppy ones.
Yeah.
I think about Salem's Lot too. The window tapping scene that scarred all of us. It's so you can see the black drop and everything, and it's just.
But I think they're so desensitized now because everything that's been like so in your face. Like if you look at the Hostel series, if you look at all this, it's like gore porn, blood, and so now we're starting to take a little bit of a step back into the more artistic nature of horror movies and such like that.
Thank you.
Thank God.
Well,
but,
and
yeah.
And I'm going to counter my own argument here because I said if Exorcist were released today, it would be perhaps a horror movie. And yet they did actually they released The Exorcist Beginnings. Is that what was the name of it?
Something like that, yeah.
And it did not do well, and it made some money, but it was not critically well received. But they did try to push it forward, and as horror, but it didn't quite land, I think, the way that they
I think they
expected
tried to kind of piggyback on the Emily Rose kind of style of The Exorcist.
Great movie, though.
Yeah, it was a great
Emily
movie,
Rose.
yeah. But the new one that came out, I think they tried to marry the two together in a weird way, and I think that's where they kind of faltered.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be, if they were to remake The Exorcist at this point, it would be something that would be very delicately done to make it scary for the whole range of people.
Yeah. Stephen, I want you to get your input on this as well, and then I want to shift topics. But did you have any further thoughts on the Exorcist effect, I guess?
Well, I think it's just also like kind of going what I think Meredith was touching on some things that also resonate with me is and the way I did the show too, it's like I think everyone has their own, the way they're coming to a film, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I had a really terrifying, traumatic experience that I could not explain when I was 10 years old. And so the reason I fell in love with horror and the paranormal especially was because I wanted more answers and I also was curious. And I think if you're going at it from a pure entertainment aspect, that whole sensationalism is what's getting a lot of these people, and that's why they have to keep going further with it. And for the people that like to watch films and feel something that feels a little bit more real and like the atmosphere and the psychology of it, those aren't as sensational. So that audience is being divided. And people like myself, I really want to see more of the other kind, like Amityville horror from the 70s that was all atmospheric.
Yeah. And
hardly any jump scares or things like that or special effects coming out at you. But that's what The Exorcist kind of like did for me. Is like I saw them taking it. It was like a slow build to what happened, and the effects were there, but it was very good effects, but they were simplistic. Yeah. And the whole story was very like slow burn. Like it doesn't get really scary until past the halfway point in that film. Yeah.
Well, we didn't have CG back then either, so that's a whole other element that we have to factor in.
I've seen some film. I mean, I actually think The Conjuring, although the facts of the matter might be slightly different, but the film itself I thought was very effective. But films like that, films like
Hereditary.
Hereditary's great.
But even Insidious, which I forget if Insidious was PG-13, but I sometimes do think those filmmakers that are able to stick the landing with the PG-13 movies are impressive because they have to scare more by showing less sometimes. But just a button on Exorcist, there's no denying the fact that it was a great recruitment tool for churches, Christian churches, specifically Catholic, and then even like some fundamentalist churches, and the reports of possession and people requesting exorcisms skyrocketed. And that is something that kind of continues today. And
it's good for business.
It was definitely good for the God business. So with that said, And within pop culture, paranormal pop culture, we saw as a result that there was this push for, again, kind of a Christian-centric ghoul, a ghost and then demon, right? It's a double shot.
And not even consistent internally, but you know.
No. But then we did reach this point where we got things like Korean horror, we got the J-horror genre, we got things like The Ring and Grudge, and that started introducing other elements in a big wide world that was not of a Christian or Judeo-Christian ethic into it. And Meredith, I want you to kind of kick that off because you did spend a lot of time in Japan.
I did. I lived in Japan for a while, and
That's
I
right.
watched a lot of horror movies when I was there, and still do. Yeah, the interesting thing about when you look at the different cultures is, and again, we tend to take a Japanese movie and turn it into an American movie with a Japanese base, but the yokai monsters and like all the different like creatures and beings that come from their religious beliefs are actually very different. Clearly,
Yeah.
from I wasn't raised Catholic. Sorry, I'm the one person up here that was raised Batholic, but basically, you're seeing a whole nother perspective on it, and I think that makes it actually almost scarier because
Yeah.
you don't. It's something you don't know. It's something you don't understand. You don't have a background on, oh, this particular monster comes from, the mountains and it comes and devours people whole. It comes out of the TV, which is a whole nother thing. But bringing that aspect in, and also how their culture sees things, because there's certain aspects you'll see in Japanese horror movies and Korean, all those things that you wouldn't see in an American film because it doesn't make sense to us because it's part of their culture. So it's interesting to see that part come in.
Yeah. And people kind of becoming familiar with like the yuri, right?
Yeah, the yuri for sure.
Different types of phenomena out there. I'm curious, anyone who wants to weigh in on this, are you finding there is an appetite for different kinds of cultural scares within the paranormal?
God, I hope so.
I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I think
I would watch all those.
the show we do, Paranormal Con and Camera, we're able to talk about folklore across the globe.
Sure.
And present different ideas. But we're also seeing a lot of films come out like that. The one I've been mentioning is Bishal Dutta's It Lives Inside. It came out recently. It's about a Indian American girl, and she's dealing with an Indian demon. So it's interesting seeing those kinds of things emerge. Are you guys finding there's an appetite for different kind of cultural approaches to the paranormal within pop culture?
I'll just say that there's a certain allure that is built on the ever so slight differences between cultures that influence a lot of the imagery and techniques that we see. And for me, what I see is in Japan and Asia and China, we have different forms of talking boards. And I cannot pronounce a single movie in this genre, but there are a bevy of Asian talking board movies about the different types that use, Kukuri is the Japanese version. And, there are just these slight differences, not only in the appearance of the boards, obviously, you have kanji characters or the different characters and the appearance of these boards. They use, again, slight differences, an overturned teacup for a planchette. But one thing I love, and I see these posters, I think, oh my God, that is just so creepy. Like, it's an automatic writing technique, okay? So automatic writing, the spirit possesses you, and rather than pointing to letters on a board, the pencil takes your hand, but it's a cooperative technique. I'm gonna put my microphone down to display it, where they lock hands like so with a pencil between them. And it just that's the movie poster. It's just these interlocked hands with the pencil, and of course, their eyes are whited out and possessed, and just this, it's just that different. I mean, here it's this, but there it's this weird, again, it's just a slight different that looks alien in a way that, like, to me, the movie poster's enough. I'm like, well, I've got to see that, and it's just the way they're holding their hand, and to me, trying to track those ever so slight cultural differences that make it bizarre and alien and foreign to us, in a way that creeps us out is, the important aspect of that for me.
The recent film, I think it was an A24 film, Talk to Me. It was, definitely a big success for indie horror. And what I really loved about it is they clearly had done their homework about horror and were pulling from different kinds of tropes and genre and whatnot, but also introducing a new mythology that felt very real. Did you see it? Did you talk about it? They definitely lean into some Ouija stations.
I get the text a lot. Yeah.
So it's like it feels both familiar, even though it is quite fresh. But yeah, Greg, add to that.
People keep saying that it's dead now. It's dead. Zombies are not dead, my friends. They're not. It's across all cultures, right? I mean, zombies are everywhere in every culture. And talk about cultural appropriation, it's not. Each one of them are very, very different, even within the United States, even in Japan.
Well, anytime we get a zombie script across our table, we literally have to be like, what kind of zombie is it? Mm-hmm. What caused it? Is it something where? Oh, which one?
Can you call it a zombie?
Can you call it a zombie? Yeah, it's not zombies. What they are is lethal. But
are they coming to attack you? Is it coming into your butt?
Oh.
Is it a butt zombie?
Okay, so I watched a movie recently called Zombie Ass.
Boom! Thank you. Enjoy the curry chicken.
Yeah, it's Japanese horror at its finest. My friend Brian will love this.
I've been to some Comic Cons where things get a little sweaty. It feels like you're walking around through a lot of zombie ass. But,
it's.
They attack you in your butt, right?
Yeah, they come and then they come out.
I didn't make this up. Y'all quit it.
I'm telling you, it's a thing.
It's a thing.
There's a whole scene where they're like walking on all fours backwards with things coming out of their butts.
But
it's great.
But on the point of zombies, I mean, the fact that it comes, the notion of zombies. What's that?
It's coming from a new place.
It's a new place.
It's coming from a dark place. It's the origin of Haitian voodoo zombies that then became something very much co-opted by white people in horror movies. And then, of course, Romero, God love him, R.I.P., then created the ghoul that then became sort of our modern notion of the zombie.
Right.
And people have been remaking the zombie ever since.
But, I mean, with this idea of different kind of cultures. So Greg Lawson. All right. So I've known you for well over 10 years.
A long time.
Long time. So going back to when you first started doing paranormal investigations, how many times would you encounter someone that would casually or even know what a djinn was?
None.
And now?
Everybody. Well, a lot of people. People in the paranormal know what a djinn is.
Show of hands. Okay, everybody knows what a djinn is. Okay, where we get the kind of pop culture idea of the genie, but very much active entity within Muslim culture, Muslim belief systems, and it is a thing. It is a thing that is very strongly believed in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, how much is like pop culture kind of to blame for some of that, or is it the paranormal folks that have kind of spread that notion?
No, I think pop culture. I think a lot of the movies, a lot of the very fun Disney kind of movies, got the idea. They took all the really cool, nice, really sweet things out of what that is, and made it popular, and it's okay. Jinn is probably not okay. It's probably a bad thing, and they're tricksters. They enjoy fooling humans and making you think you're experiencing E.T. or a ghost, or they will manifest whatever you have in your head of what your expectations are. I do talks about what I call VABES, which are values, assumptions, belief, and expectations. And we all carry that with us automatically. And when we go into a situation, if we're a UFO guy and there's a dark shadow in the corner, we're going to think it's a gray. When a spiritual person would say it's a shadow person, and a demonologist would say it was something demonic. So we will identify these things with what we believe in and what our expectations are. So
I think it's important too to note the influence of Dungeons and Dragons coming as closely on the heels of The Exorcist as it did, and how incredibly influential it was. The writers pulled from every culture they could to write monsters for what we call the monster manuals in that game.
It's next to my bed.
A huge influx of
so good.
other cultures' beliefs in these boogeymen where you have ghosts are given like 6 different names and creature write-ups, based on they were just borrowing names from other cultures and ideas from other cultures, and that was just an injection right into our cultural mainstream.
It made it
West.
perfect fodder for, to quote Mrs. Lovejoy from The Simpsons, won't someone please think of the children? Like, to demonize it along with heavy metal and then later video games, But Steven.
I'm just thinking about what Greg said, too. It just really clicked with me to think about, because my perspective of the paranormal is, I've been doing this for a while. I had my own personal experience, but I learned from my personal experience. I ended up going back and having to face that haunting that terrified me when I was a kid as an adult. And I learned that it was nothing bad. But what I think is crazy is that I think with films, they're cherry picking the bad for horror,
Absolutely.
paranormal.
Yes.
And I think I would like to ask this panel a question. It's not to skip people, but I know, Greg, you do a lot of paranormal investigation. Aaron, yourself, I do as well. I've never really been ever scared or attacked, and I've been doing this forever. It's finding these curious, unexplained events, and when I dive deep and I take psychics to these locations blindfolded, and they start to pick up on exactly what all the people are experiencing, they start to communicate with the supposed spirits, they get answers, and I find them in the history books to be true. And I'm like, wow, this is fascinating, and these spirits are typically just needing something, or they have a story to get across. But where we come from, and people that love paranormal horror might think that the world is a little bit more, the paranormal world is dark and scary, but I haven't experienced that. I've actually found it to be very enlightening and spiritually moving for me. So I'm curious where y'all come from.
Agree.
Awesome.
That's what I wanted to start.
I want to hear Aaron's take on this.
So I have encountered things that I think are not nice. I've encountered things that I do think are dark in origin. However, I also think a lot of times TV, which I've been involved with a lot of it, but I think I've avoided getting caught up in some of this. I do not see a demon around every corner. I don't even really throw the D word around. I think in the realm of ghosts, there's sort of like, I live in Brooklyn, and you walk down the street, most of the people that you pass, you tip your hat, people are going to be like, hey, how you doing? Then maybe you'll run into someone that doesn't say anything at all, or maybe even someone that's like, meh, a little grumpy, and occasionally maybe you'll run into someone that's actively a jerk. But rarely are you running into someone, if ever, like that's outwardly evil or bad. But I think whatever we're occupying here, right, in this flesh bag mortal coil, is going to influence, if we're sticking around in some form or fashion, going to influence how we are on the other side. So, but I have encountered some dark stuff. But I also am encouraged by people in the paranormal realm, and I do think a lot of people who are trying to do paranormal TV, not everyone, towards a move towards respect and empathy, and trying to think about the human element and trying to approach things from a very humanistic approach. That's how much of an approach it is. Approach. But so I do think that is kind of shifting. I actually think there's an overall paradigm shift culturally, entertainment-wise, and how we look at the unexplained, and I think things are moving weirder in a good way as far as embracing a bigger picture. That's sort of my opinion on it.
No, that's great. And I just had, to add on that, too, is where you were talking about the different cultures. There's a lot of similarities, though, with the Japanese, the horror and the paranormal. They're hungry ghosts, out for revenge because something was wrong. Something was wronged to them.
Well, we dwell on the negative.
Yeah, and then also in our culture, a lot of the American ghost story is like unfinished business, something they needed to take care of or something like that. So I think there's a lot of similarities across the cultures that kind of touch on those things. With the films that we do, obviously, though, it wouldn't be very entertaining if there was just not that scary, there wasn't much happening.
They were just bouncing down the street together.
So yeah.
I think we can tell scary stories about paranormal legends and everything, while still also being authentic to the culture.
Yeah.
And you know, you could scare the hell out of people without exploiting other cultures and without turning everything into and now you've got a demon on the loose that's trying to eat your soul. You know.
I want to clarify my answer though. So I've been to a lot of different locations. I've been to some in the Middle East, some in Central America, some in the United States that were very powerful locations. I don't know what that was. I can't explain that. It's just a feeling you get. I always talk about as far as my experiences are typically much more metaphysical than what I would say is what we would define as paranormal. There is a place in Texas, Haunted Hill House in Mineral Wells. I don't like that place. Bad things have happened there. I spent typically when I do an investigation, I do 24 hours by myself, and that's just how I do it. And I have no reason to go back there. I didn't like the place. So I can say, yes, that I have that one experience that was really not, that was not cool.
Yeah.
I've been to others that were very powerful locations, but so.
Brandon, on your end, are you the recipient of people saying, especially because you're so well known and because of your website, people trying to offload their boards being like, I got to get this out of the house because it's cursed and I got stuff. I don't know why I'm using this voice now for it, but
because that's what they sound like.
It's sometimes. Are you kind of the recipient of people that are like, get this away from me, it's bad news?
Less so being the recipient of the item, which I typically wouldn't accept because it's almost always a 1960s era Parker Brothers board, so hardly the collectible of the class.
I'll take it.
But no, more often than not, and this is just kind of a hard line to draw professionally. You'll have what seems like an innocuous enough conversation. It starts off, I've got this old board, and then the stories start, and I'm not that professional. I'm not an exorcist. I'm not equipped in any way to help this person deal with the psychological trauma that they feel they're going through, whatever may be causing it. I'm certainly not a psychologist in any way or a therapist to help them through that. I'm a historian. And so I do run into a lot of situations where these people reach out. They need an ear to listen and probably help. And they're reaching out to me for it as using the board as the medium, no pun intended, to try to get the help that they need. I'm not equipped for that, so I've had to learn to be very nimble in my professional life as far as that goes, to just dodge that because I'm not a mental health professional. So.
And one thing we have in common is I too have been referred to as not that professional. Meredith, what I really love about your work is that by creating the monsters, by creating the nightmares, when I have talked to clients, the visual reference guide often is movies. It goes back to movies. And we see that with aliens, we see that with ghosts and how many things it goes back like the Lady in White kind of idea that we see repeated time and time again. It's not that it's not true, but it becomes that visual reference point. Have you experienced this moment where something you've created or contributed to then becomes part of the conversation as one of those visual reference points where it's like, I saw this monster, again, that voice, I saw this monster, and it kind of looked like this. And you're like, I don't know, but I like him. I think I'm going to stick with him for a bit. He talks like,
When that guy comes and talks to me about my monsters.
Yeah.
I did a Yama-uba for a makeup demo in LA years ago. A Yama-uba is a Japanese mountain demon who lures you up to the mountain with her beauty and then opens her mouth at the neck and devours you whole. And it's really cool makeup. Very happy with how it came out. Super fun. I just did it for fun because I love monsters. And we've had people reference that, people make tattoos of that, people like send me fan art of that, everything like that. And I've had people reference back to that one as far as like, yeah, I want the teeth monster like that. And I'm like, do you know what that is? Zombies come up a lot. They're like, I want to do the Romero zombie. I want to do
zombies?
No, not the butt zombies. You're just going to keep coming back to that, aren't you?
I'm just curious.
This was his fault, just so you know.
I just want to let you know, Greg, this is going to be distributed across the internet.
This is pre-recorded.
My friend Brian, thanks for showing me the zombie movie, because now it will live off in infamy forever. But yeah, the ones that we get referenced a lot, we'll get zombies like Romero, zombies like Walking Dead. There are certain styles of zombies that we get called back on. Everybody wants the American Werewolf transformation.
Sure.
Various things like that. That's typically what comes into our play as far as like visuals that people will come up with. And then the other one is, we want this, but not this.
Yeah.
So we have that zombie conversation. I feel like I have the zombie conversation once a week of, what is your zombie? What does it look like? What is it like? What is it not like? And then developing the prosthetics and like how it moves, everything like that. And it's all like based on visual references in these films that people have seen.
I mean, you have this like really powerful kind of position, because what is pop culture except it's a shorthand for us to communicate. Are you part of my tribe?
Sure.
Are you someone that speaks my language? It's mass items, images, things of that nature. And what are memes except a very condensed nugget of pop culture? And what was the one going around? Was it Momo, the meme of the woman with big eyes, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
an interesting kind of side effect is I've spoken to people who have experienced phenomena, and I've heard they're not calling it Momo, but I've heard descriptions that sound very much like that.
Yeah, I get
so what your imagery can influence the belief and the visual references of people.
Sure. I definitely have people when we're designing, like particularly like ghosts or things where they're based in folklore, like the sleep hag.
Yeah.
We've had conversations about that of like, what does your sleep hag look like versus this person's sleep hag? Because the person that we worked with on that sleep hag movie, it was called Dead Awake, they had sleep paralysis, and they had like a demon in their head that they saw. And getting that out of them and designing the creature to match what they saw and then adapting it so other people now can see what's in their head is a really interesting thing to be able to do, because now we create the creature of the Exorcist. Like, nobody's not going to see Linda Blair when you see the Exorcist. No matter who they put in that role, it will always be Linda Blair in your brain. So that's something we really get to do, is we get to like create these things that will mess with people in their nightmares for the rest of their life, ideally. But yeah, that's kind of my world.
And continue contributing to that, again, that sort of mass cultural phenomenon. Another one I'm reminded of is looking through the planchette window from the Ouija movies. Yeah. Made up for the movie, folks. Never in history was it said, if you look through the planchette glass, you can see ghosts. Never.
Valid.
It was made up for the movie.
Yeah.
And yet now people tell me, the Ouija board historian, no, that's an ancient
See,
practice.
it's interesting, yeah, because
and you're like, wow, it's 10 years old.
Between an effects artist and a director
Yeah.
going, what would be cool?
Yeah.
Let's look through this and see
Yeah.
these, and
Oh,
what do
it's
they look like?
brilliant.
What do
And
these
it's
ghosts look
brilliant.
like?
It's a great narrative device. Like it works so well.
It's perfect.
And it
Yeah.
feels like when you reference through the looking glass, look through the looking glass, right? Like, okay, well, look through the Oculus, look through the Ouija board. It makes sense in a way.
It makes
so
perfect sense.
It was perfect.
And makes it feel like it's been around forever. But
yeah.
We create history
We
in
create
these movies.
Well, dude, and then there's the whole argument about at what point are we also creating the paranormal phenomena? Because
100%.
Yes.
once we start saying that enough, are we in fact manifesting it or bringing it forward?
Yeah, did it exist before we put it in this movie?
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
Greg?
The jinn, right? That's kind of, if you want to go full circle on that, is that the manifestation? Are we thinking about something, and then there's a spiritual realm, and there's an entity that goes, oh, they're thinking about clowns. Let's show them some clowns, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is a fascinating point. And I would very much like to delve into that more at some point. But
But.
I wanted to ask you, as an investigator, and Stephen, you as well, this notion, again, visual reference points, going into the home of someone or going into a business or whatever, and they say they're experiencing things, when you go in and you're kind of, have you had that experience where you're looking around and you're kind of clocking what posters are on the wall or what physical media, if they even have physical media, in their bookshelves or entertainment stations, saying like, ooh, there's a lot of ghosty stuff here or a lot of demony stuff here. Have you experienced that where it's then kind of influenced what you can expect from a client?
As a mental health investigator back in the 80s, you would go in, and it's kind of an unusual thing because you don't have to have a warrant to go into somebody's house when we're not talking about law. We're talking about mental health. So you go in and you look and see what that person has in there, and the experiences that they will have will be very contemporary to their time. In other words, if I go to the Austin State Hospital and look through the 1870s, 1880 records, the admissions will be attributed to religious, consumption, or masturbation. Y'all deal with it. That's what it says. And it's very contemporary. You didn't see things like I was abducted by UFOs. You didn't see things that I was impregnated by little robots in my blood. You didn't see those types of manifestations in the 1890s, 1880s, but you see them today, and they're very, very contemporary to science fiction and horror. And it's really interesting when you look at it. You go, okay, are we creating this, or is it creating us? I'm not sure what's going on here.
Stephen?
For me too, like I haven't had a whole lot of experiences like that because a lot of my cases are public buildings and like businesses like tattoo shops or restaurants or bars. So they don't have like a lot of their own personal, things in there. But when I get personal cases, I definitely look out for that. But I haven't had too many of those. I've only had about 3 or 4 personal homes. And in those situations, there wasn't a lot other than like their own spiritual beliefs and things like that I've noticed on the walls, like their books and things like that, altar at home, based on like Catholic religion, things like that. But the thing that I have been trying to do with my type of investigation is I try to get to that, rule out all the things that could be possibilities first by not including people in conversations. So when I do my investigations, it's only me interviewing everybody, and I interview them separately from each other. So I'm able to hear all the stories separate and just determine they're all telling the same story. They've seen things. And a lot of times you can tell someone that's sort of like easily swayed or easily like kind of scared by things. Their ghost stories are like the lights are going on and off.
Yeah.
This and that. Things that are a little bit less like physical, that are a little bit more unique. And where I go on cases where it's like multiple people have seen a figure walk into a room, or they're getting actual things flying off shelves, not just they come in, something's fallen over. So I have to kind of look at things like that and then break down that sort of thing. I'm not a mental health person either, so I have to be very careful with that. And I'm not there to give them the answers. I'm there to just sort of hear the story and see if I can validate any of the experiences that they're having. And the third layer of that is bringing in psychic mediums that don't have any idea where we're going, and they come in blindfolded. And when they go and get the exact stuff that they're seeing matches what they're experiencing, then I'm like, okay, I think this has some validity, and I need to give this family or this business some time because they do need some help.
Yeah.
And we try to get them those answers when we can. Yeah.
I mean, you, in effect, though, when you're going into a location, this is sort of separate from horror, but when you go into a location, you are experiencing some level of popular culture as far as a very concentrated ghost lore, ghost stories.
Exactly, yeah.
In a way, we could create the ghost tonight and say there's XYZ ghost, and then if enough of us talk about it and spread it out there, then this place is haunted, and then people, weeks, months, years from now, can come investigate and say, oh, I heard there was the ghost of this. So when you go into a location, you are still dealing with that pop culture effect of what they expect to see and what they expect to encounter.
Totally, and I
encountered.
just keep it me. That's the key. I don't tell my team, and I don't tell
Yeah.
Anybody coming in. So that's the thing. And these places aren't popular. I go to places that are not publicized haunted locations.
Yeah.
So I can do just that. So it's not like the lore's out there and exists, and they can come in and they're like, okay, I didn't tell any of the team members the stories yet. I've documented as a journalist. I know now I'm going to watch and see where this psychic medium goes. And what happens is, like, for instance, on this property that we came here, there was a lady in a window at the tattoo shop that's right over here. And I brought her to the Spider House, which is now Tweedy's, just to have a coffee. I told her I'm investigating a case nearby. Didn't tell her it was the tattoo shop. And the psychic medium sits there and she looks up at me and she goes, well, I know you haven't told me anything, but there's a woman in the window of that tattoo shop and she's calling me up there saying, let's go. I got a lot to tell you. And that's where it's like, whoa, okay, that's not lore because this didn't exist.
Yeah.
The lore of that woman didn't exist yet. And I brought her here without knowing we were going to investigate that place, and it's exactly what people were experiencing. So those are the things that I'm trying to do to kind of get rid of that, because that's the hard part. You go in as an investigator, everyone on your team knows the stories. They're looking for that ovulus to say a word that matches, and 100 other words won't match, but that one will match, and they'll be like, oh, it said this. So that's where you're kind of reaching in investigating, whereas I'm trying not to do that. And a lot of people aren't. Like, I know Greg doesn't. He's really adamant about just going in and being clean and working with certain tools that he feels he trusts, things like that.
Well, that's the reality TV or unscripted TV component of it as well, is that a lot of shows that have trained people to believe that paranormal investigations means using a lot of gadgets that light up and make noises.
And a black shirt.
And it can actually get in the way when you're focusing on that thing so much. You're potentially missing out on the experience around you. I do want to open up to questions. I know we've been going for a bit. Does anybody have questions for these? Yes, Marina. That hand was up fast. So I'm just going to repeat for audio purposes. Marina's question was, with the new Exorcist Believer movie, not Beginnings, which I misstated, if how they did kind of evoke the imagery and the spirit of the original in this new one. I don't know if you saw it, but if you have any statements.
I haven't seen the new movie yet. We've been getting through a little bit of film craziness, but I have seen bits and pieces of the trailers, and the makeup's great. It's actually really nice that they didn't over-escalate it. Mm-hmm. That's the best way I can put it, is that, like, a lot of times nowadays they'll just keep throwing stuff on a person and it just gets ridiculous. The good thing about this one and the original Exorcist is there's a minimalistness to it that just kind of, like, keeps the person human while making them demonically possessed. And when you leave that human element in, it actually makes it a lot scarier. And I think they did a really good job of that. I haven't seen the movie, so hopefully they continued that within, like, how they developed the storyline and the arcs and everything like that. But I think, at least from a makeup perspective, I think hopefully it'll stay within a good realm. I don't know if they bring a demon in at the end or anything like that. I don't know yet. But yeah.
In a way, that's also, like, that evokes a lot of what people report on so-called actual exorcisms, or people that are possessed, as far as the facial features can be contorted and look a little bit different, but it's still them. It's sort of them, but not them. It's not full-on monstrous transformation, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's what makes it scarier.
Yeah, I agree. Whether that was intentional or not, from the makeup perspective, they kind of tapped into something kind of authentic.
And I think horror filmmakers have an issue, too, in that the risk of escalation, the further beyond the realm of reality that you go. And for me, as someone who studies spiritualism and seance history, I mean, God, I remember, what was the series? Anyway, there was a seance, and it was just so over the top. So, the effects, the gibberish of the medium going into it's so over the top that it was penny dreadful. Sorry for any fans, but that early seance scene was so ahistorical. I mean, it was not even. It was grounded in earlier escalations of the visuals in the media, not escalations of anything based in history or historical fact. And I think that's a problem that modern filmmakers definitely have.
Way too
It's
often.
far more preferable to try to keep it grounded in reality.
We try to have
you
that
know,
conversation, like every time we meet with a new
important.
director about their demon, their creature, is the more you can connect with it on a human level, the scarier it is, because you could, in your brain, you could actually run into this on the street, as opposed to this big, huge, hulking, like legend demon with giant horns and everything like that. You're not going to probably run into him walking in a dark alley. So,
Pumpkinhead.
oh God.
But also, like, the more you can preserve the authenticity of the era or of the moment or whatever, if you kind of build that trust with the audience and say, okay, we're doing what looks like a pretty authentic Victorian seance, and now shit's gonna get real and we're gonna push it beyond and get a little bit creepy, you've kind of earned that trust to push it beyond. So thank you for the question. Any other questions? Yes, hi, over here. And let me just reiterate, Hill House, Mineral Well.
Yep.
Well,
Haunted Hill House and Mineral Wells.
And what was your take?
You can go stay there. They'll let you stay there.
What was your take on the lore, the fact versus the fiction?
Okay, there's a lot of lore. There's a lot of these ghosts that's supposed to be their shadow man and this sort of thing. When I went in, I secured electricity to the property. I shut everything down. They left. They were very gracious, and they left. And I let the house cook for a little while, and I did metal detecting in the perimeter of the house. I recovered 3 items. 2 of them possibly were related to a homicide that had happened there a few years past of a girl that was related to that house, and that was turned over to Mineral Wells Police. And then I went in and I set up. I just do audio and visual and video. That's all I do. I don't do any spirit boxes or anything like that. And so I rotate all my stuff around. Different things happen during the night. Very innocuous. I mean, doors that would open. I'm a grown man. I know how to close a door. I know how to lock a door. Thank you, people. And I very carefully made sure that I understood how far that bolt went into the wall, how this door kept coming open, and then I'm checking it to figure out whether there's switches in there. I had secured the electricity to the house, so I don't understand what was going on there. So there was multiple things. I was hit with a rock when I was upstairs. There was a couple of things that happened. It was the most amazing thing that ever happened to me. I'm walking up the stairs, and a giant light came out of the kitchen and went by me. And that was the pinnacle of my paranormal investigation right there. I was
Your
like,
nope moment.
yeah, it was like, what? That's the deal. You know, I had a huge adrenaline dump. It was freaking outstanding, right? By myself, I don't know what's going to happen. And I continued doing the rest of the stuff that I was doing. 2 weeks later, I'm at my house. I'm in the kitchen. A giant light comes out. I go to track it, and it zooms out the front door. And I'm like, oh, I have an attachment. Something came home with me from there. And then I started thinking. My lovely wife, Lynn, right over there, is a para-optometric. She works for an optometrist's office. I'm like, yeah, I'll give her a call. Hey, Lynn, I saw this big white light. She was go, get in here. You probably have a retina detachment. I went in, they looked, and I had ophthalmic migraines in my eye. So it creates this orb. So God stole that experience from me. And I was like, I had it, man. I had it. I had the answer, you know?
You saw Bigfoot.
I saw Bigfoot. It was just glowing orb. So to answer your question, I recommend you to go there. I have no reason to go back there. But it's a really unsettling place.
And I would just add to that, I don't know that location specifically. I haven't been there, but something that paranormal entertainment, paranormal unscripted TV teaches us is that everything happens within 42 minutes of an episode, and really the unexplained does not operate on a schedule that is known to us, not in my experience, and we don't have the rule book, so it's not, open and shut case within one piece of episodic TV. So maybe you didn't have it. Maybe you just had an optic situation, whereas you might go there and have a paranormal experience. We don't know.
So let's do this. When you have an experience like that and something normal comes out of it, and you realize it's not a paranormal experience, you need to tell people that. That's important that you do
I agree.
that.
Yeah.
But did the entity that came out of there cause the ophthalmic migraine? Yes, I got you, didn't I? You don't know. We can, as logical human beings and scientists and stuff, we can sit and go, okay, this is most likely just a physiological thing that happened with me, and it caused the bright light. But you could turn it around and say, did the bright light cause the ophthalmic migraine? So
that rabbit hole gets really twisty-turny, right? It's once you start going down it. Any other questions out there? Hi, in the front row. This is a great question. How have
huge.
horror video games influenced us specifically? I mean, look, I think it's worth noting that we talk about movies and TV shows, but video games are such a massive part of entertainment and such a profitable part of entertainment that they most certainly influence us. Are any of you guys gamers that want to speak to it?
not a gamer.
Oh,
But
lame.
think about this. All the people that develop the games, right, will tell you, oh, it doesn't have anything. It's not going to make people violent. It's not going to make people do this. It's not going to make people do that. Yet, they will spend 10 times that amount of money selling the same thing to our military to train our soldiers to kill people. It's just a little interesting on how that works. So,
Thanks to Castlevania, I carry a whip on all my investigation.
Silent Hill scared the crap out of me, I'm
Yeah.
be honest. But I do love Pyramid Head and all that. The things that they've translated into movies and like cosplays and everything like that are amazing. And then look at Last of Us.
Yeah.
So good. The fungus monsters. Oh, the best.
I'll show my age a little bit in that my last real immersive gaming experience was on CD-ROM, and it was called Phantasmagoria.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Fantastic game, but yeah, that was and really I checked out, I think, of
Yeah.
gaming because of that game, because it was so immersive
It was
and
very
exploring around. I love to explore. I love to go into abandoned places, and I don't think I could get anything done in my private or professional life now if I had gaming in it. I would want to see everything in Red Dead Redemption or whatever I would just want to see every thing the way I do.
The open
when I-
worlds are dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
My
I'm-
only experience was I grew up in my best friend's father was a person that sort of got me really interested in the supernatural, because he wasn't telling me he had some ability, but he would see things in the house and have conversations with his wife, and I would overhear that. But what I would be doing is I'd be playing Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 with my best friend, and we would do it way into the night and have to walk. They had their gaming console in a cabin.
Yeah.
Separate from the house. Terrifying experience out in the country, having to walk from that playing Resident Evil 2 into a haunted home, because the family's home was supposedly very haunted, and I had a couple of experiences there too. So the game, I'm not a big gamer, but that game has a soft place in my heart, because it really amplified the horror I was experiencing in that haunted house playing a zombie game out in the cabin in the woods. Yeah.
I recall, this is way back, I believe I was in undergrad, there was a game called Fear, and it was F.E.A.R. And what I found fascinating about it, especially as I was very much steeping myself into folklore and paranormal research, is how, again, I love it when creators do their homework. Not that they should be beholden to the lore. I kind of feel like learn the rules, then break the rules. But something about that game, they were accurately kind of reflecting certain elements of paranormal investigation and paranormal theories, and it was also creepy as hell. And you think about the experience of playing games, especially of that nature, darkened room, maybe you're with some friends, but a lot of times you're alone, so you're simulating essentially being alone in that haunted house, and that's such a cool vibe. The other element to it is augmented reality games are really pushing things forward as far as bringing the ghost into our real world. Something like 15 years ago, there was a game spin-off or tie-in to a movie that did not really do super well, but the app game tie-in would allow you to insert ghosts into photos and whatnot in smartphones. And the impact of that was insane because I started seeing newspaper articles of like, man finds ghost in, I don't know why I'm doing old-timey voice now, but I'm going to stick with it. Like, man finds ghost in renovated bathroom. And it was directly like a page boy, newspaper boy ghost from that app that someone inserted in there. And maybe that person was duped by a friend that's like, oh, bro, you got a ghost in your bathroom. Or maybe they actively were trying to pull something over on the newspaper. But that was a very measurable impact on like newspaper articles reporting on ghosts and ghost photos and whatnot. But yeah, now with like so many VR headsets, Oculus, I think it's really fascinating, the paranormal that's kind of merging with our real world, with our VR world. And then just the other thing, and you know about this, is so when Xbox first came out with their Kinect system, they had this the SLS, the SLS what is it? Sensor light structure SLS camera. Anyhow, it's basically it was designed to capture humans as they're playing games so it would respond to them, and then paranormal investigators brought it into the investigative space to detect ghosts. The SLS camera is designed to look for things that are human-like shapes. So that tripod that is filming us right now, it might try to pick that up and try to form some sort of human-like shape, even though it's not necessarily a ghost, it's just a tripod that looks like it's got legs or whatever on it. So I think a lot of times that was carried over to TV shows and said, it's a ghost, and the ghost is waving at me. Instead, it was just trying to like bounce around and find a human shape. But I have seen strange things on the SLS cameras where you're aiming at a flat wall, it looks very, everything is very static, and yet you start seeing something move. So I have seen some anomalies that way.
If you have a Tesla, drive through a cemetery and put it on and watch what you think. That's an interesting kind of way to look at it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, YouTube it.
I most certainly, I love technology as it applies to the paranormal. I just don't want to overly rely on it. But I think there's a lot of fascinating things there's people doing interesting advancements with tech as it applies to whatever strangeness is happening out there. And I think we're going to have some fun stuff coming very soon. I hope that answered your question. Guys, before I let you go, I want you to promote your stuff. It's hype time. How can people find you and support you and all of your endeavors? Stephen Belyeu.
Thanks for having us, Aaron. Night Owl Podcast, Night Owl True Ghost Stories. You can find us at www.thenightowlpodcast.com. And yeah, there's many ways to support us by going on our tours, subscribing and rating our show. But we're a journalistic type of paranormal investigative show where we try to investigate unknown haunted locations in and around the Austin and Central Texas area.
Thank you. Meredith.
Hawgfly Productions. It's spelled Hawgfly. Hawgfly, like your redneck friend.
Like my redneck hog. I love them Hawgfly Productions.
Like Hawgfly Productions? So hawgfly.com. Everything's under Hawgfly. We've got the Instagram is Hawgfly_Meredith. We've got all that. And much of you are filmmakers, so if you need fake blood, we have our own bloodline called Hog's Blood. Hawg as well, not real pig, as well as a few other supplies that we use for our blood business. And we make custom prosthetics and custom monsters and creatures, and we like to make your crazy visions come to life. So bring them to us.
She made Greg for us this evening.
Yeah, Greg is fake.
That was awesome.
He's really not this old.
Yeah, and my name is, if you go to theparanormaldetective.com, you can find me there, and also the Paranormal 60 podcast. You can find us there, where I read the news, and as I misspell it, I have to take a shot by time 45. It's a bad show. So, Dave Schrader, and sometimes you're on there.
I've been on there. Brandon.
Almost all of my research and historical efforts come under the Mysterious Planchette banner, mysteriousplanchette.com, at Mysterious Planchette on your social media outlet of choice. But one newer endeavor, which is kind of fun, is my partnership with my friend Brandy Knight on our TikTok feed, which is at Occult Archaeology, where we dive into the history of specific items from our various collections. She's a fortune-telling apparatus collector. I'm a spirit and seance device collector. And so there's a lot of fun videos on there in short format, easily digestible bits. And yeah, at Mysterious Planchette, pretty much all over the place.
Very cool. And for me, well, this has been Talking Strange Live, so I would kindly request all of you guys out there to like, subscribe, share it with a friend, share it with an enemy. It brings people together. Leave a nice review. That would be swell. And also, if you have a film, you can reach out to us and we can help promote it. If you have a story of the strange and unusual, please email it in to talkingstrange@denofgeek.com. You can write it out, or if you prefer, you can record it and we will share it on a future episode. And I would kindly request you to check out Paranormal Caught on Camera on Travel Channel and the Max streaming service, as well as 28 Days Haunted on Netflix. And you can find me on patreon.com/Aaron Sagers, where we do movie live streams, tiki recipes, and a lot of nerdy, spooky, nerdy chit-chat, and across social media at Aaron Sagers. I want you guys to, and I want to offer a sincere thank you to Ethereal Horror Fest right here in Austin, Texas, for allowing us to put on Talking Strange Live. And please make a lot of noise for my panelists, Stephen Belyeu, Meredith Johns, Greg Lawson, Brandon Hodge. And thank all of you guys for being here. And as I say with every show, until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird. Thank you, Ethereal.